Okay, so hello. I'm going to be talking to you about how not to be boring on Twitter. I think originally Joe had put this as how to make Twitter work for you and your company for this evening, and I thought that I would zero in on the question that we get asked at the agency I work for, where we do everything from social media to TV advertising. And one of the things we get asked is, should my brand be on Twitter? Should my company, should my business be on Twitter? And what should we do when we get there? So I thought if I could zero in on this as the thing to really tackle in 5 minutes. And I also love the fact that a format that is all about brevity is one that I have to discuss in 5 minutes. But I think that's probably not necessarily a bad thing, because I think, I am as I say on my Twitter profile, which is at @PaulTrueman74, if anyone wants to be entertained by me on Twitter. I'm a Twitterholic. I do really enjoy it, and I'm slightly addicted to it, much to my shame. But I think it's probably just as well I've got a 5-minute thing, because otherwise this could go seriously long. But afterwards, anything that we talk about that you want to find out more about, just please ask away. I think the first thing, I'm going to take you through a couple of the pointers that we give to clients and people who talk to us about whether they should be on Twitter. And this goes for things like Facebook and all the other myriad of social channels that are out there nowadays. Are they right for you? Are they right for your business? So I think there are a couple of things you can ask yourself that will hopefully lead you to the right answer, whether that is a yes or a no or a maybe. So the first thing I would say to anyone thinking of getting on Twitter for them or their businesses is just go and have a look, make yourself at home, sign up for yourself just as a personal account. I think there are 29 million registered Twitter users in Britain at the moment, 10 million of whom have an active account. So you sign up, you never tweet, you're in good company, you're with 19 million other people. And I think the figure I heard was that 10% of anyone on Twitter in the UK is tweeting. Everyone else are doing some kind of variant of lurking, as it's known. I've got friends who will text me, and they know who they are. They'll text me and they'll say, "Oh, I see you're talking tonight about Twitter." And I say, "Oh, you spend longer on Twitter than I do." And they say, "No." I say, "Well, I never see you tweet." And they're not comfortable with that, and it's not everyone's cup of tea. But one of the things that it's brilliant for, and this is why this is the first thing I think you should do, is use it as a way to learn about what people are saying about your business, if you're really lucky, or not your business if you're slightly less lucky, and maybe just your competitors, the landscape in which you work in. So, if you're in food and drink, what are they saying about your particular part of that space? Is it something that they're saying? But then you'll start to get a feel for the shorthand of Twitter, because it does look quite weird when you first look at it. There are lots of acronyms like RT and MT, and there are funny hashtag signs everywhere, and there are funny hashtags after everything that people say, and people seem to sometimes use it as a way to start a conversation. Sometimes people seem to use it simply as the punchline to a weak joke. It's me. And it's pretty impenetrable, I think, to a lot of people. So get on there, have a look around. That's the first thing. Because what you're going to have to work out is whether you have a brand that lends itself to that particular channel, and that's not everyone. There is nothing worse than the brand that goes on Twitter, tweets twice, 3 times, maybe half a dozen times, and then that's it. And you look at them and they've kind of, not tweeted in 2 years, and it's all a slightly like MySpace was 10 years ago, or GeoCities if you've got a longer memory. Channels that people go onto and then start to gather dust. And one of the ways you'll know that it's right for your company, your brand, your business, is that this is my particular theory, which is that there are some goods and products and services that are naturally social. And by which I mean Twitter excels in extremes. It's something that people are, they feel themselves urged to tweet about when they are feeling, you know, very positive about something or very negative about something. They don't tend to tweet about the stuff in the middle, you know, most of daily life. That tends to be, in my experience, what people do on Facebook. And you know, if they're taking a photo of it, that tends to be what they do on Instagram. I mean, it would be interesting just to do a very quick straw poll. I mean, hands up if your business or your product or your service is on Twitter now. So about half of the people in the room. And what if you're on Twitter personally? About half, not the same half. That's quite interesting. But your product, your service, if it's social, it's one of those things that it works for people at those extremes. So for example, there might be a skincare product that sorts your spots out, you know, and that might work for you at 10 o'clock at night. You put it on, you wake up in the morning, your spots are gone. That is an extremely positive kind of reaction. Equally, there's an extremely negative reaction, but the fact is that that is something that you feel social about. It moves you to express that, and I think that's what I'm sort of trying to say. There are food and drink brands, for example, that are a very good example of this. One of the companies we work with is Thatcher's, and they do a fantastic job online, socially, and you know, Thatcher's has a great story, and it's a great brand, and it's something that people like to tweet about. You know, 4 o'clock on a Friday afternoon, go on Twitter, you'll see a lot of people talking about how they plan to enjoy a Thatcher's or two that evening. That doesn't work for every single brand. You know, you don't want to be the toilet cleaner brand on Twitter or on Facebook saying, hey, we're the new toilet cleaner. Hey, do you like cleaning your toilet? We like cleaning our toilet. It's Friday, it's 5 o'clock, it's toilet cleaning time. Followed by tumbleweeds. You know, you've seen these brands, right? We've all seen these brands. None of us want to be these brands. And I think that's why one of the things we recommend to people, or I would always say to people, is work out whether you're one of these brands that exists at this kind of love-hate point, because you don't want to necessarily be the brand that exists purely at the hate point, at which point I would say you're probably doing something wrong in the first place. But if you're a brand that attracts an extreme of emotion, then I would say you're probably halfway on your way to being a decent brand on Twitter. So if you decide, you know, as a result of that, that you're going to start tweeting, I would say welcome to the content business, because that's what you are now in, regardless of what you actually do or what your brand actually is about. You are, you know, going to be relied on to produce content, because on Twitter, you know, what people really like is they like finding links that interest them, they like sending them on, they like retweeting them, they like sharing stuff. That's what Twitter is about. I mean, I follow over 1,000 people. My Twitter timeline is like a constant river that surges, and I dip into it for 10 minutes at a time and lose the next hour. And I don't, you know, I have friends who go on Twitter straight away and they follow 8 people, and they're normally 8 people they know. They get bored quite quickly because it's just 8 people that they know, and they go on 2 days later and those 8 people are still there. I bumped into a friend of mine recently and she said, "You're always on Twitter." And I said, "Well, how many people do you follow?" She said, "I follow about 10 people." I said, "Well, that's why, because you don't follow enough people. Follow interesting people. Don't follow people you know, follow people you don't know." That's the beauty of Twitter. You know, it's what they call asymmetric sharing. You know, if you follow them, they don't have to follow you. It's not like Facebook where you both become friends at the same time, which is, in the jargon, symmetric. You know, this is asymmetric. You can follow whomever you like. They don't have to follow you back, which is why obviously Stephen Fry doesn't follow 20 million people and Lady Gaga doesn't either. So if you're in the content business, now you're on Twitter, what are you going to do? You know, this is the key thing. Getting on there is free, and it's easy, and it's fast. We could sign up any one of your brands tonight, but it wouldn't necessarily mean we had anything to say when we got on there. So I have 2 simple rules. Be true, don't be boring. If you follow both those rules, I think you can create some really nice content around your brand. And by content, let's give you an example. So we'll take Thatcher's, for example. They are a brand with a lovely story, which they can be true about. They have some really interesting characters on there farm, where they tweet and they share from, they post from, so they're not boring. They tweet about everything from the state of the orchards to competitions where they give away cider at the end of a Friday where everyone's worked quite hard for the week, and you guess how many apples they've milled that week. The winner gets a crate of cider. It's a pretty nice combination of stuff that you want to pass on to your friends and stuff that if you're a cider aficionado you really enjoy, because you get to learn something about the craft and the care and the tradition that goes into their brand. As long as you're true and not boring, I think you can tweet about anything. You don't even have to be true. I mean, nowadays, Betfair Poker has one of the most successful Twitter accounts for a brand in the UK, and they're not even, they employ a bunch of comedy writers to write their tweets, and if you've ever followed them, if you don't, then I can recommend it. But they vary from the surreal to the ridiculous, and they have almost nothing to do with poker or betting, but people follow them because they're not boring, they're interesting, and Twitter is the anti-boring. I mean, if you're on Twitter and you're tweeting about, what you had for breakfast, something's gone horribly wrong somewhere, I'd say, for your brand. If you start to generate that content and you start to get a response from the people that follow you, this is where the other kind of rule kicks in. This is not PR. This is not about controlling damage and controlling risk for your brand. It's about being open and relaxed and crucially not panicking. When you get a tweet from someone that mentions your brand and says, oh, I've been very disappointed with XYZ, you don't overreact, you don't panic, you just talk to them on Twitter. You find them. One of the things you do is you set a bunch of searches for terms that might come up that are around your area. If you're a cheesemaker, there are a whole bunch of searches that you might want to set up where you can spot the conversations that are happening, because the beauty of Twitter is that you can go and find these conversations and drop in on them. With Facebook and some of these other brands, people will turn up at your front door online and unload their woes with your brand, or with your customer service, or with your brand promise, or any of these other jargony words. But basically, they will let you know in no uncertain terms that they are disappointed with your brand. Equally, they might say something nice, but you have to deal with that because it's there. It's on your Facebook page. On Twitter, if you're getting insulted by someone who has 9 followers, the only people that are going to see that are those 9 people. There's no need to kind of give these guys the satisfaction of engaging with them, unless you see it as a genuine customer service issue, in which case it doesn't matter how many followers they have. That's good customer service. You go in, you sort it out, and 9 times out of 10, in my experience, you get a positive reaction because of that. Because a lot of the time on social media channels, people think that they're not going to get a response. They're tweeting or they're posting or they're sharing, and they're not necessarily expecting you to answer. They're certainly not expecting the brand to suddenly pop up and say, hey, hang on, let's talk to you about that. That wasn't meant to happen, or, email us the details. We'll see what we can do to help. 9 times out of 10, in my experience, that turns around what would have been a negative experience into a positive, and they leave that encounter with some kind of positive advocacy for your brand, and that's what I think social can do. I would say one of the final things I would say is that Twitter is fun, and your brand should be fun on there. It links back to kind of everything I've said, but there is a sense of freedom, and it's slightly like the Wild West, I think, on Twitter. If you don't take yourself too seriously, but you take your customers very seriously, I don't think you can really go wrong, because there is a transparency about social media that I really like. It's why I said that it's not about PR, because it's not about controlling damage as such. It's about saying, yes, we're a brand that aim to get it right every time. And when we don't, this is a really helpful channel for us to find out about that and fix it. It's direct. There's no call center. There's no please press 2 if you're having a problem with our thing. If you want to get hold of a brand on Twitter, you stick their username at the front of your tweet and you tell them what's wrong. And if they're any good, they will get back to you. If they're not, that kind of tells you what you need to know in the first place. But good brands will get back to you straight away, and you will get the problem resolved, and you will hopefully have a different opinion of them than when you started tweeting. But to a certain extent, you know, anything goes as long as it's done with you know, a degree of thought. You have made up people on Twitter. You know, someone said earlier today on Twitter, I can tell you've been on Twitter too long when you see a tweet from Prince Charles and you assume it's a made up character. You don't assume that Prince Charles is actually tweeting. It turns out he was, or at least one of his flunkies was. So I'm just going to leave you with my favourite tweet of the week, which will hopefully try and convey some of the sense of I think the fun you can have as a business with it. So this is at the end of an evening of disappointment for England yet again in the Euros. We had failed to live up to expectations, and on Twitter, a brand, the Tourism Board of England, were on there, and they obviously employ someone who knows their onions, and they tweeted, "So England are out on penalties. To find out more about our traditions and culture, why not visit England.com." And it got retweeted 7,000 times, and they picked up quite a lot of followers, and that is Twitter at its best, I think. Thank you.